long time, the last place I ever wanted to be was a parade. Too crowded. You got to lift your camera over people's heads, take a photograph. The frames were all sloppy. It was hard to control the composition. It was just not, parades really didn't interest me photographically. But what I realized is the staging areas for parades are fascinating. And what a staging area is, for those of you who don't know, is just these kind of, when people are it isn't their turn yet to march, they usually have like a side street or an area where those people wait until they're called to go out and march on the parade route. So everybody's there with all their equipment. St. Patrick's Day parade, all the musicians, drummers, bagpipe people, everything, kids from high schools, cops, firefighters. They're all just kind of congregating. They're all waiting on these side streets that shoot off the parade route until they're called so they can, then go out and march. So they're practicing, they're talking. There's cops and firefighters there, so they're having like a tipple in the morning. There's high school students practicing. There's all the kind of stuff happening. There's all these like little dramas happening. And that's where all the great stuff is. So I never saw the parade. I didn't see 2 seconds of the parade. I just saw everybody getting ready for the parade. And that's where all these pictures are from.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to you too, sir. It was interesting because the St. Patrick's Day parade it's mostly cops and firefighters. Not entirely, but there's a lot of cops and firefighters. So just a couple of blocks away from the parade, before it started, everybody's congregating, and we look up in the sky, and there's all this black smoke starts kind of like filling the sky. And the firefighter's like, "What's that? What's that?" And we very quickly realized there was a fire on top of an office building. So, like every firefighter in New York City just about was, and in the 5 boroughs, we're just a couple of blocks away from this fire, but they're all like, drinking and hanging out and, wearing kilts and in their dress uniforms and holding bagpipes and everything. So, I mean, the fire got put out pretty quickly, but it was just kind of a trip that I'm here with like, 10,000 firefighters, and then a giant fire starts on top of a building a couple of blocks away. So that was interesting for sure.
Two more.
I shot the parade with my Leica MP film camera and a Voigtlander 35mm 3.5 color scope bar. Shot most of the parade pretty much stopped down. It was really bright out, pretty high contrast, so there were areas where it was like more shadowy, and I exposed more for the light than the dark because I just want the dark to go to black. I don't like my shadows to have a lot of detail in them. I like to crush the blacks. So you'll see that in the pictures. But shooting an event like this, when you have a camera in your hand, you're getting up really close to the attendees. So in some cases, I would be 3-4 feet away from them. And, especially when you're approaching cops and you're getting that close, you get a lot of weird looks. So I would do stuff like sit down on the ground and shoot straight up. And they could see, like, look at this guy's sitting down on the ground. And then it was disarming. Or I'd hang around, I'd wait for things to happen, I'd watch everybody, see what they were doing, seeing the conversations, see who was the character in a crowd, or who looked nervous. Like some of the fire department recruits who were holding flags and who were lined up. Some of them looked like, really nervous, like they didn't want to mess things up. And so I would just kind of hover around those people and, wait for things to happen. And that's when you get those moments, is when you wait for something to happen. You see a drum instructor talking to a bunch of high school kids and getting them to practice, getting them to do their routines. A musical director bringing somebody through the scales, the horn players, and you just wait. You watch their hand signals. You watch how the students react. All that stuff is about waiting. And it's about being able to capture it really quickly by bringing the camera up to your eye and just clicking. And that's what's great about range focusing, presetting a focus distance, knowing what your exposure is already, so you don't have to do any of that stuff when you see a moment. You just bring the camera up and snap. And so that's what most of these photographs are. They're very close. They were taken after a period of observation. And I think they have a quality to them that speaks to that approach. I wanted to talk about the film versus digital thing a little bit, because obviously some of the pictures I show in this video are from the Leica MP film camera, which is what I'm shooting only film these days. And then a couple of years ago, I was shooting the Q2 Monochrom at the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and I used that camera quite a bit. And I'm sure some of you showed up here thinking like, oh, this on some level, this is going to be some kind of comparison. And it's not really meant to be that, but it would be silly not to kind of address it. So let's talk about the digital camera first. Let's talk about the Q2 Monochrom. That was probably the easiest camera to use that I've ever picked up in my whole life. I don't have it anymore. Sold it to get a Rolly. But 28mm lens, really good autofocus, super bright EVF. You see through the EVF and everything's in black and white. So it's just seeing your images through an EVF that are in black and white, you get to see what all the contrast is. You see the composition, you see the light and shadow, you see what the picture's going to be. And also because it's 28mm, you can set it at f8 and pre-focus where your distance is going to be, and just put it in manual focus, and you never have to focus the camera. You just press the button. So you could just shoot like mad, and you can look through the viewfinder and see whether or not you're overexposed, underexposed. I mean, obviously in a digital camera, especially a monochrome camera, you've got to shoot, you've got to expose for the highlights, because they blow out really easily on Leica monochrome cameras. I'm not the first person to say that. If you read any review of that camera, any of the monochrome cameras by Leica, that's one of the things they say, expose for the highlights because they clip real easy, and it's true. So I would always put it on my metering on highlight metering, so that I wouldn't blow my highlights. It was fantastically easy to use, unobtrusive, never had to think about it. It was great. So why am I not shooting with that anymore? In a way, it was digital cameras, especially like black and white cameras, they're so super detailed. And the images come out of the camera very flat. You need to work them in post, add contrast, up your black levels, add grain, do all this stuff. And I realized what I was doing is kind of trying to make the images from the camera look more like film. So I'm like, well, why aren't I just shooting film if I'm going to take a picture on a black and white camera and then do everything I can to make it look like film? Okay, I mean, it's easier than film. It's less expensive than film. You don't have to develop it. It's just a memory card and batteries. But the thing is, no matter what I did, it really didn't look like film, because you're talking about a hyper-detailed image, a tremendous amount of information. It was like 46 megapixels, so everything was like super, super, super detailed. And it had a certain look to it. I mean, it was shocking. It was amazing. You go, wow, look at these files. Look how much resolution there is. But when I think of any photograph that I love, any photographer's work through history, I've never said to myself ever when I picked up any of those photographs, like a Joseph Kudelka photograph, let's say, or something, or Cartier Bresson, whoever, pick anybody, and said, wow, look at the detail in this photograph. Not one time. Never. I have never looked at a picture, admired a picture because of how great the detail is. Now, if you're doing product photography, if you're doing some kinds of landscape photography, you're doing, architectural photography, great. Maybe you need that detail. If you're like Bertinsky and you're taking photographs of industrial sites, and you want hyper detail to kind of convey the scale of things, and you want to blow it up to the size of a wall, I get it. But for the kind of work that I'm doing, I think at some point the detail is kind of like a distraction, because I'm really more interested in lights, shape, movement, blur. I don't want to put too much gravity on the emotion in a photograph, because not every photograph has to have emotion. I think emotion and storytelling and all that stuff can be important, but they don't need to be in every photograph. Sometimes I love to take pictures that are totally devoid of emotion or storytelling, and they're just abstract, and you look at them and you go, what the fuck is this? But what's great about the MP is, and about shooting on film, is it's just more, it's chewier, I think, because it's less detailed. You pay more attention to things like shape and light and movement and the rhythm in the photograph. I really do think, after starting with film, because I'm the age I am, so all we had was film back when I first started taking pictures, and then we switched to digital, and after a couple of years I was a digital shooter after it got good enough, let's say in the early 2000s, and then I shot digital for 20 years. So I'm not knocking digital. I just think that the way that things have gotten so hyper detailed, it's not how we see reality. It's not how I think the best photographs in history spoke to me. Detail and sharpness were never a thing. When I look at photographs on YouTube, when I look at photographers on YouTube who talk a lot about sharpness, edge-to-edge sharp, corner-to-corner sharpness, detail, 60 megapixels, whatever, what I see when they show their photographs are photographs that are obsessed with those things. They showcase and highlight those things. And those things, sharpness, edge-to-edge sharpness, corner sharpness, all this other stuff, they're just not important to me. And I don't think they're important in photography, period. Especially with like AI and everything now, and the level of quality that there is, and things just, when they're so hyper detailed, whoever like wakes up and says, or goes to a museum and says, I want to go look at some sharp photographs. So there's less information when you're shooting on film. I think the thing I like about shooting on the MP, clearly when you shoot with film, there's a lot less detail. There's less sharpness, there's less clarity when you're shooting on 35 millimeter film. But it highlights certain things in a good way. The noise is organic, the highlights are organic, the out of focus areas, the blur, the contrast, all of it looks familiar. It's easier for my brain to process. I think it's easier for people to look at those pictures and say, oh, that's beautiful, And maybe that's just because I've been looking at film photographs my whole life. There's this kind of cliche that film slows you down. And when I shoot film at the St. Patrick's Day parade, I shoot like a motherfucker. It's like I'm not shooting slow. I'm not in the moment. I'm running around and trying to get moments and trying to find them and be present for them. And if I see a moment is coming, I slow down. But I would do that on a digital camera also. The camera and the medium are not making me be slow. I'm being slow because I want to be slow, whatever my tool is. So this whole cliche of film slows me down and I can take better pictures because I'm slower if I'm using film, that does not apply, at least to my photography at all. Like I said, I'll burn through 3 rolls in 20 minutes or 10 minutes if there's something to take pictures of. I'm obviously not putting it on, 8 frames a second and going, putting a motor on your camera and blowing frames at a parade. If that's what you're looking to do, digital's better. The feeling of winding on the shutter and the experience of the manual focusing and having to get really close because I'm using short lenses, the MP is a really pleasurable camera to use. I'd say from a sensory standpoint, I don't think I've ever used a camera in my life that's more, from a tactile standpoint, more pleasurable to use than the Leica MP or M6 or any M variant you would choose. Just the way it winds on, the way you load it, the way you focus the lens and everything, you feel very much at one with that camera. And it's an absolute joy to use it. The Monochrom was a lot of fun to use also. But for me, at the end of the day, I don't want to buy a digital camera for 7 or 8 grand, whatever they are now, with a tremendous amount of detail, to then bring that camera into post and then add noise and add contrast and spend all this time working on the image to get it to look like film and to almost like devolve the image to make it look like something that I could just say, let me load up a roll of Tri-X and just fucking shoot. And I get that it doesn't have the same dynamic range, in-body image stabilization, all that shit. You know what? With film, even if they could put in-body image stabilization in a film camera, why would you want it? Blur looks great on film. It looks like shit on digital, I'm sorry. Looks fake, looks bad, in my opinion. So, if you're looking to take a lot of images, if you're in a, let's say you're working professionally, you're out there to cover a story, go cover the parade. I mean, you probably wouldn't shoot in black and white if you were, you'd have to shoot in color. But let's say you're in a professional situation, you have to deliver negatives really quickly, you want all the pictures to be perfect, you want the camera to kind of help you not make mistakes, then hands down, something like a Q2 Monochrom or just one of the cubes from Leica is a fantastic tool for that environment. But if you're trying to do something a little more artful, I want the mistakes. I want film to interpret what I'm looking at. I don't want to look through a viewfinder and see exactly what I'm going to get. I like to be surprised. I like my knowledge to get me most of the way, and then have the magic of, silver crystals and the interaction of light and my ability to hold a camera steady or not, and all that kind of come together to make something and surprise me and create something that's more like art. So anyway, appreciate you watching. If you have any questions about using the Leica MP, about home development, about the Leica Q2 Monochrom, about film versus digital, about St. Patrick's Day, about shooting in New York City, being a photographer on the streets here in New York City, hit me up in the comments below. I really appreciate you watching. Peace.